Hello, everyone, and good evening. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it just another minute for everyone to enter from the waiting room. We appreciate you being here with us on this snowy evening here in Virginia, if you're with us from Virginia. All right, and it is 6 o'clock, so we will go ahead and get started. Again, welcome everyone. We are so grateful for you joining us this evening. We know that much of Virginia has gotten some snow and ice, and that's changed a lot of our schedules for the past couple of days. So we appreciate you joining us. Our session tonight is being recorded and will be made available to our members in the event that anyone needs to disconnect or wasn't able to make it here with us this evening. But as we get started, I just want to take a minute to welcome you all. And tonight's session is on the critical role of school and district leaders in translating the science of reading into classroom change in a session avoiding the implementation gap with TNTP. We were fortunate to see TNTP at the Fall National Reading League Conference in a very similar session and felt like it was so relevant to our work here in Virginia that we decided to invite them and talk a little bit about their work and how that actually intersects with the work of the VLA. So we are incredibly grateful for them giving their time this evening. And along with welcoming you all, I'd like to also take a minute to welcome our board. We have past president Susan Campbell. My name is Jennifer Sassano. I'm president this year. We have Kelsey Noel, our vice president, our secretary, Angelique Wincoop, our treasurer, Jen McCrae, and our amazing events coordinator, Erin Saxon, who helped put this presentation together this evening, publicity, Brandy Marola, membership, Jacqueline Alston, governance, Laura Ziegler, and our board members, Kim Boston Brown, Tisha Hayes, and Emily Solari. So many of our board are here with us this evening, and we'll be answering any questions that might come up in the chat. But thank you all for being here with us. So here in the Reading League of Virginia, our vision is that every educator is prepared to implement evidence-based practices to meet the diverse profiles of all students with the goal of becoming skilled lifelong readers. And we gear our presentations to align with our mission, which is educating every administrator, teacher, and parent to the research and evidence that has emerged from the science of reading. So our goal is to bring together all stakeholders with around relevant programming to our work here in Virginia schools. And to help us do that tonight, we have two very special guests from National Consulting, and that is Devin Toth-Gladgow, who is a partner with National Consulting. And Devin's work at TNTP focuses on the intersection of instruction and equity. She supports districts, schools, and educators to ensure that all students have equitable access to trajectory-changing academic experiences. Devin joined the team at TNTP in 2016 to support the development of the opportunity myth. Since then, she has worked with states and systems all across the country on vision setting, high quality instructional material implementation, and educator development. In 2021, she led the content development for the state of Tennessee's early reading training, which provided more than 11,000 teachers in the state access to high quality professional development in reading foundational skills instruction, and has since been revised to reflect the needs of students and educators across the country. As part of the organization's national consulting team, she leads internal learning on evidence-based instruction and practices across content areas and supports consulting teams to align their approaches with the organization's best thinking on academics. Devin learned her Bachelor's of Science at the College of Holy Cross in Worcester, Massachusetts, and began her career as a high school English teacher in Dallas Independent School District. Prior to joining TNTP, she obtained her Master's of Education from Southern Methodist University and held teacher preparation, coaching, and school leadership roles. We are incredibly glad to have Devin here with us this evening, along with her colleague, Ruthie Mayo, Senior Manager at TNTP. Ruthie is an expert in learning and development, motivated by meaningful work. She has over 6 years of experience designing content, facilitating training, and implementing coaching programs in virtual and in-person sessions, and is passionate about maintaining strong relationships with clients to plan, execute, and monitor the success of projects from initiative to close. Most notably, while we are so thrilled to have Ruthie here with us this evening as a very special guest, because she actually coordinated the literacy curriculum training in Prince William County Schools, Virginia, in which over 1,800 teachers participated between June and August of 2024, with 97% reporting that they felt prepared to apply the skills from the training to their role. So thank you, Ruthie, for your work here in Virginia, and we are so excited to learn more about that. So on that note, I'm going to turn it over to our partners at TNTP so we can learn from them this evening on avoiding the implementation gap.
Thank you so much, Jennifer. We appreciate the invitation and are really excited to be here with you this evening to talk a little bit about my favorite topic, which is avoiding the implementation gap as we think about science of reading based or evidence-based literacy instruction. You can advance this. You can actually advance 2 slides, Erin. Thanks. So just very quickly wanted to share a little bit more about myself before we jump into content tonight that I think is really relevant. As Jennifer was going through my bio, I was like, I need to update that for a couple of reasons. One, the early reading training has now trained, I don't know, Ruthie, you've done that work too. It's more than 20,000 teachers, I think, at this point. But also want to start out by letting you all know I started my career in Dallas Independent School District as a secondary ELA teacher. I taught 9th and 10th grade. And in my very first 2 years in the classroom, I taught a class that was called remedial reading. And it was a interesting class that the first year that I taught it, the district had decided they were not going to provide a district curricula for it, and that there was going to be no real expectation in terms of which students they put into remedial reading. So I had a mix of kids in my classroom as a first year teacher who read, 3 to 5 years below grade level. I also had kids who chose it as an elective because they love to read, and they were like, great, I can fill an elective spot with a reading class. And so I start with that to let you all know, I have sat in the seat of a teacher who has had students in front of them who are reading below grade level, who are potentially having struggles reading, who need some real support, particularly in things like decoding and fluency and foundational skills. And I didn't have what I needed to be equipped to support those kids. So there, all those great things in my bio, what it really comes down to is I've spent a significant part of my career at TNTP really trying to understand what I should have known and what support I would have benefited from as a second year teacher in front of my 9th grade students, and thinking about all the things that I could have done differently. So that is really core to my work, and part of the reason that I'm not joking when I say avoiding the implementation gap is one of my favorite topics and one of the things that keeps me up at night. So really excited to be here and super excited to have Ruthie share her experience that is unique to Prince William County. Ruthie's also done incredible work in this same vein across the country. So she will certainly share the work in Prince William, but also brings a wealth of knowledge in other districts, just, those who are just starting out on this journey, like many of the districts in Virginia, but also those who have been on this journey for multiple years. How long have we been in Guilford County, North Carolina, Ruthie? Like 8 years, something like that?
Yeah, as long as I've been at TNTP. So
yeah,
a long time.
Yeah. So we are excited to be here, and we'll jump right in. The very first thing that I want to share with you, Erin, if you would advance the slide, thank you, is who is TNTP? We get this question all the time because obviously we use an acronym for our company name, and so all the time people come up to us and they're like, "What is TNTP?" TNTP used to stand for the New Teacher Project. We are a national consulting agency that brings together research, policy, and consulting to transform America's education system. We do work, and you will hear this come through in the presentation tonight. Our organization does work that impacts basically everything from what we call the state house to the schoolhouse and into the classroom and community. As TNTP, the New Teacher Project, our work started with supporting new teachers in the classroom. My very first role at TNTP was as an effectiveness coach for first and second year teachers in their first, foray into the classroom as they were being certified. What we learned very quickly, though, in our 25 plus years as an organization now, is that teachers can't do their best work unless they're surrounded by school leaders, district leaders, district systems and structures, and frankly, state and local policy that enables them to do that work. And so that's why TNTP has moved from just doing this new teacher focused development work to supporting at all levels of the system. And we really believe as an organization that it takes coordination and coherence across all levels of the system in order to really make a difference for kids in the classroom. And this is especially important as we think about the science of reading, evidence-based literacy instruction, and the pace at which, right, these things have been both legislated on and are sort of coming down and being expected to be implemented in our districts, divisions, schools, and classrooms. Next slide. Thanks. So we have a wealth of knowledge in doing this work. I mentioned Ruthie has a background in doing this nationally, as do I. TNTP as an organization currently partners with 6,000 districts across 39 states. So you will see a couple of districts spotlighted today, notably one in Maryland, Washington County Public Schools, and then Prince William County in Virginia. But what we are going to share in terms of framing and the things that we've learned about what it takes to actually implement evidence-based literacy instruction well in systems comes from this work that we do all across the country. Next slide. So you all know, probably better than I do at this point, living in Virginia, that a number of states, almost all of them at this point, 45 states between 2019 and 2022 have passed some sort of reading laws. And many of the remaining states in the country are making those moves now. A lot of this has been driven, right, by what we all know to be true in terms of student reading proficiency across the country. A lot of it has been driven by organizations like the Reading League and sort of the broader media picture with Natalie Wexler's work and things like Sold a Story and all of those, Emily Hanford, all of those things. And in most cases, right, we see those laws really focused on a couple of key pieces. We see them focused on teacher training and development, so building teachers' content knowledge. Sometimes we're seeing legislation around materials, and sometimes we're seeing, money behind that supports, right, districts to do that, to do this work, to actually implement the legislation on the ground. But that part is not happening everywhere in the same way that we're seeing pretty widespread uptake in terms of teacher training and the materials, right? Making sure that kids have access to the right content, the right materials, and that educators have access to the content knowledge that they need to improve the student experience. You guys know this. You have a law in Virginia. The Virginia Literacy Act, you guys are in sort of, I would say, the first year of full implementation of the VLA this year. I'm not going to belabor the things that are in the VLA. I took a quick look at the list of folks who were on the call. I know we have some folks from Virginia Literacy Partnerships here and UVA who were instrumental in shaping that legislation, some of the things that came out of it. And I know that many of you who work in districts and in schools are sort of feeling the impacts of this legislation currently in your day-to-day work. But a couple of things I will highlight about the Virginia Literacy Act. One, we did see the mandate for professional learning around science of reading and evidence-based literacy instruction for existing educators, and the importance of improving educator preparation programs as it relates to, educators' understanding of the science of reading. We also saw core and supplemental materials in K-5 that were required by the VLA. We saw some additional reading specialist training, right? Making sure that there's a reading specialist in every school, and that divisions have to create division-wide literacy plans, individual reading plans for students who don't meet standard. There's some regional literacy coaches, I think, that are coming, and new screeners. So lots of different components to this legislation, and lots of things that are really great and really critical to improving the instruction that kids are getting in early literacy in K-5 across the state of Virginia. I will just pause here and mention that as I jumped in, I wanted to hit on my background as an educator first and foremost. I will also name, in addition to Ruthie's work in Prince William County, I actually have the privilege of working with the Virginia Department of Education and the Teaching and Learning Department and their team as a coach for a network of states that is supported by the Council of Chief State School Officers. So much of what I'm going to say and will share with you guys is also informed by sort of having that picture of what's happening behind the scenes at the DOE as well. So with that, we'll also name, in addition to all of these things, if you'll actually go back for a second, Erin, in addition to all of these things, we'll also name there's money coming into the state to support this work, which is great news. There are CLSD funds that the state won, almost $30 million over 5 years for additional regional literacy coaches, vendor-led networks to support implementation at the division level. Much of what we're going to share this evening, I am hoping you will all take back to your respective roles in your communities, in your schools, in your divisions, because it is going to take work to move what is on this page and these individual really great components into improved experiences for the kids that need it most. And so as we go through today, for the rest of the session tonight, I want you to just keep in the back of your minds, like, there's great stuff happening that has been legislated, and just these individual bullet points on the slide are not going to be enough to make sure that we have improved reading outcomes for kids at scale across the state. We're going to share a couple of things that we've learned that we think make a difference in bringing all of those things together and actually moving from bullets on a page to improved outcomes for kids. Thanks, Erin. Now you can go forward. So what we do know, right, is that in these places like Virginia, where we've legislated a requirement for educator training and professional development, that's really important. We have to build educators' knowledge about the science of reading and evidence-based literacy instruction, especially because for so long in this country, right, we have been teaching people, we have been developing educators to teach literacy in a different way. And so there's a real need to, provide additional professional development to educators around the science of reading. But we also know from a ton of research that has been going on for a very long time that although we spend a lot of money and effort and time developing educators, there is no one silver bullet in terms of educator development, nor is there a real deep connection between, or a consistent connection between, professional development for educators on its own and changes in student outcomes. So the Mirage is a TNTP white paper. It's one of my favorites. It was put out in 2015. It didn't get a lot of fanfare because, frankly, what it said was, we spend a lot of money on professional development. It's not necessarily yielding the outcomes in the way that we would expect, given the amount of resources that we throw at it. And at that point, TNTP didn't have a lot to say about like what actually does work. We had some bright spots, but we couldn't say like at scale, this is what we believe. Tonight, we're to share a little bit about what we've learned over the past 10 years that has helped us understand that. And our like little white paper at TNTP has been backed up, right, by more recent studies by Didion and Rice that really demonstrate that there's really only small or medium and sometimes zero effect on student outcomes in reading when all we're doing is educating or developing educators, even when you have really high quality teacher development opportunities. So things like letters training, things like the VLP developed educator training for the state of Virginia educators. All of those things are really high quality and they're a key piece of the puzzle, but alone, they're not going to yield the effects that we want to see. So what are we seeing nationally? We are seeing districts, what we're seeing is state mandates, right? For training, for development, for sometimes things like new screeners, new materials come down, and it's sitting on the shoulders of district leaders, school leaders, and educators. You can throw up a little thumbs up in the chat if you are an educator or a district leader or a school leader who is currently feeling this on your shoulders. We are seeing it across the country. We know we need to make a change and we need to make it quickly, but we are not necessarily supporting the educators and the leaders who are sitting in their classrooms and schools every day to shift what they are learning in theory or what is in that legislation into the classroom, into change for students, into ways in which we shift what we're looking for in classrooms, etc. So this is what we're calling at TNTP the science of reading implementation gap. This is the thing that keeps me up at night, because as I think about where we want to be in 5 years as a movement, right? I don't want to be another reading first. I don't want people to look back and say, oh yeah, we tried science of reading. We actually even legislated it. It didn't work. It didn't work for kids. So we're going to go back and we're going to try something different. So what do we do? What is the solution? 45 states across the country have legislated science of reading. Thank you, Cassie. I appreciate the feedback. So 45 states across the country have said, this is important. We know it's important. And we're not quite sure yet how to translate what we know needs to happen and what we think is important to actual change in the classroom. And that burden is often falling on district leaders, school leaders, and most of all educators who have kids sitting in front of them every day who need support and guidance and effective literacy instruction. Next slide. So how do we do it? We build coherence. We avoid random acts of instruction and assessment and professional development and evaluation and. Coherence has become a little bit of a buzzword in the education space these days. If you want to know more, it's actually not a new concept. So what I find really interesting about instructional coherence is that it's like the new buzzword, and yet the seminal work on instructional coherence or instructional program coherence was the initial term, was done by Fred Newman in 2001. So this is something that we've known about for a long time. We know coherence matters. When we say coherence, we're talking about alignment of all the pieces in a division and in a system, but we're also talking about what students experience every single day in the classroom, and that for them feels coherent, that they know what they're going to do today, tomorrow, next day, across their instructional spaces, and that it is evidence-based, and that it is driving them right toward becoming proficient readers. I'm about to show you 3 different slides in succession that include 3 different frameworks. When I did this session at the Reading League conference in October, I got really nervous about 3 different, like giving people 3 different frameworks on overload. And then I facilitated the session and everybody was like, that was so great. Also, the 3rd framework wasn't in the deck that you gave. So we're going to stick with the 3 frameworks. Know that you will have access to the recording, and I'm also happy to share a PDF version of the slides if it's helpful as you are taking some of this information back to your communities, to your schools, to your districts, and you're thinking about advocating for practices that create coherence and support effective implementation. The first one, if you would go back, Erin, thanks. The first one really speaks to the educator experience. So as we were talking, we really started off talking about professional development, right? What we're seeing in the science of reading in particular in this country right now is a real focus on developing teachers' content knowledge. But if you look at the graphic on the screen, in order to actually shift teacher practice in the classroom, we need more than just content knowledge. We need content knowledge. We also need to build teachers' pedagogical content knowledge. So what are the specific teacher moves that I need to be able to practice in my classroom that support the content that I am trying to teach? And then they also need to have knowledge of high quality instructional materials. I noticed in the chat that there is a question about resources that haven't been carefully vetted or piloted. In some of the best legislation, and also in places like Virginia, we're seeing states that are developing lists of high quality instructional materials. That means that materials align to, yes, I will talk about CLSD funds in just a second. What we are seeing is states develop lists of vetted materials that align to both the state standard and the sort of evidence that we have for effective literacy instruction, right? What we would call best practice in instruction. But we're not necessarily seeing states develop educators who use those materials effectively, nor are we seeing a bridge being built between content knowledge, pedagogical knowledge, and knowledge of high quality instructional materials, all within the context of the unique students and identities in their classroom. The best professional development that you can provide to your teachers, to your school leaders in the division will bundle all of these things together and provide educators collaborative practice in context. An example of what this looks like, you'll hear in just a second, TNTP has its own 30 to 45 hour asynchronous online course about the science of reading. We think it's great. It's gone through like multiple revisions, multiple people have had their eyes on it from a national perspective, but that is only one component of professional development that we provide to educators if we're trying to support the implementation of the science of reading. Educators who do that go through that 30-hour course. They also then have a chance to go through facilitated trainings where we're like, hey, remember that thing you learned about phonological awareness in the asynchronous course? Let's pull out your instructional materials. Where do we see that reflected in your materials? Oh, good, it's right here. Here's the routine that your materials use. Now let's prep and practice for you to actually do that in your classroom in the upcoming year. So that is what strong professional development looks like. It is not content knowledge in isolation. It is not knowledge of materials in isolation. It is all those things together. Next slide. We also need to attend to coherence in all elements of a division or a district. So this is a very colorful slide, but basically what it's meant to demonstrate is what I just talked to you through around professional development. lives in workforce experience, selection, support, collaboration, design. There's a lot of words there, right? But basically that means how a division hires and trains, develops and supports their educators. That is one component, though, of a whole system that needs to be in concert when you are thinking about shifting the way that you provide literacy instruction to students on the ground. Quick anecdote, there is nothing that torpedoes a implementation of strong curricular materials that align to the science of reading faster than an assessment system that is not aligned. Ruthie, this may be a thing. I may be about to embark on a thing that happened in Guilford County once a long time ago. CKLA, Amplify CKLA, is a great set of high quality instructional materials that align to the science of reading. If you provide educators with CKLA and they go through their first semester, they teach the kids, and then they use DIBELS to assess their students for middle of year proficiency, their letter naming fluency is going to tank. Because the scope and sequence in CKLA actually doesn't teach letter names until later in the year. It focuses on phoneme, grapheme correspondence first. That's a very small example, right? But if you are inserting in a system a new set of materials and a new way of teaching, but your vision for instruction is not aligned, and everybody in your system doesn't necessarily know what they should be looking for when they are going into classrooms and evaluating instruction, right? Or parents and community members don't know how some of this stuff could shift, it's going to tank that implementation real fast. And it's going to be very easy for educators and school leaders who knew how to teach reading in a balanced literacy way, right? To say, well, this doesn't feel coherent to me, so I'm going to go back to doing what I know. When you have a coherent system and you're thinking about how it all works together, you're really pushing for people to implement the instruction, right? To translate that content knowledge that they've built in the into the classroom in a way that is consistent and is going to yield results for students. Last framework slide, and then I'm going to pause for questions. Thanks, Erin. This has tiny, tiny, tiny little language on it, so I apologize. And again, we'll give you access so that you can take it back and read it to your heart's delight. But essentially, the last framework that we talk about is if we have the sort of pieces of a system, right, that was on the last slide, we also have different levels within the system, and everybody has a different role to play. Everybody's role looks different. So for example, when we're talking about the science of reading, your community partners don't need to go through letters training, right? Your school leaders actually need a different level of professional development and content knowledge, and frankly, a different sort of entry point into the work than educators do. So as you are thinking about how you're creating coherence in the system, the messages all have to be coherent, from the policymakers to the community partners to the central office leaders to your school-based instructional teams, your school leaders, your educators, right? Everybody has to be speaking the same language, but not everybody needs the same development or the same level of content knowledge, right? And so we want to make sure that there is consistency along the vertical spine, and we'll share some examples here in just a second. But we also want to make sure we're giving people the right entry points. School leaders, I know there are some of you on this call. School leaders have a lot on their plate on a daily basis. I'm a former assistant principal. I lasted a grand total of 2 years. I could not hack it. So now I get to work at TNCP where I get to think about instruction all day, and I don't have all the other instruction and implementation. I don't have all the other things that encroach upon my time. You guys are the glue that holds it all together. We cannot ask you to be the expert in the science of reading. I love you dearly, and I know some of you want to be. I wanted to be. But there are specific things that you need to know and look for in a specific role that you play in this work that is different, right, from an educator who truly does need between 30 and 80 hours of development on the science of reading to be able to do this work in the classroom. So I will share these, but remember, when you're thinking about educator professional learning, content knowledge, pedagogical content knowledge, and knowledge of materials all bridge together in one package. Help educators make that bridge. That educator development and training needs to sit within a broader system that is coherent and aligns to the change that you want to see for students. And everybody in the system has to both understand the message and be able to share the same message and know what their entry point is and the unique role that they play. I'm going to pause before we jump into the Washington County case study. I would welcome, I know I've been trying to answer some questions in the chat. I'm usually pretty good at that. But if anybody wants to come off mute and ask questions, I can take a couple of them now before we launch into the case study.
Hi, I just posted in the chat. Are there any like hands-on materials that you can use to promote science of reading? Like I have those little, pop-it blocks and magnetiles and things like that. But is there anything else that you would recommend for early childhood?
So I would say whatever you're doing, you want to make sure that it's serving the materials in your classroom. So the pop-it blocks and your tiles and your manipulatives, all of those are critical for early childhood. They may be separate though, right, from whatever curriculum your district has adopted. And so you want to be thinking about how you incorporate those into the scope and sequence that is laid out in those materials. So I know that's a bit of a cop-out answer, but wanna like keep that focus on the materials that divisions this year have adopted and are working on implementing should really be the core, and then everything else should really align to. And there are great ways. Ruthie, maybe you can speak a little bit to this when you hop on and talk about Prince William, about ways in which we support educators to like use supplemental materials, use the manipulatives in service of what is in the curriculum. But the curricula, by and large, in the state of Virginia, actually not by and large, the curriculum that has been approved in the state of Virginia and the districts have adopted is aligned to the science of reading, and implementing it with some level of fidelity is really the thing that is going to most accelerate learning for students, even if it feels clunky in your first year. So Ruthie, I think when we get to Prince William, you can probably speak really nicely to like some of that clunkiness that you've experienced doing that work and how you mitigate it. Anything else before I jump forward to Washington County? Thank you for the questions, you all. I appreciate it. Okay. Washington County, Maryland, and I am going to do I'm not going to say I'm going to do a poorer job. I'm going to do a much more high level job of sharing the work in Washington County than we did at the Reading League conference in October, simply because my incredible colleague, Staria, who leads this work on the ground with Washington County, was unable to join us tonight. So you're going to get my version of this through her. But if you are deeply interested in the work that is happening in Washington County, Maryland, I am happy to connect any one of you with Staria to learn more about their journey in depth. If you can move us forward. So Washington County, Maryland, you can see it on the map there, is a district that realized around 2016 that they really needed to do something about literacy instruction in their district. So in the 2015-2016 school year, they looked at some data and they realized only 36% of their incoming kindergartners were kindergarten ready, which was among the lowest statewide. And they, made some changes to their instructional program. And by 2019, they had been working for about 3 years to shift literacy instruction in the district. And they still only had 39% of their kindergarten students meeting DIBELS benchmarks throughout the year. So we're seeing this also across the country, y'all, and I'm sure you are feeling it in your districts right now, divisions right now. You are working really, 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 really hard and potentially only seeing incremental change. So in 2020, right before the pandemic, Washington County met with and got connected with Dr. Nell Duke and the Council of Chief State School Officers and started doing some educator learning on the science of reading and on evidence-based literacy instruction. So they had one of the best theorists out there providing education to their educators about the science of reading. So their very first investment was around educator development. They also made some investments in universal pre-K in that same year, and they started to see some incremental change, but they were really only seeing 5 percentage points of growth a year. And when you're very close to the bottom of the state list in terms of kindergarten readiness and your literacy proficiency scores, right? Those incremental changes do not feel like enough. So in 2022, Washington County contracted with TNTP to support their implementation of science of reading and evidence-based literacy instruction. And what they did, what we worked with the district to support them to do, was exactly what I named on that first framework slide, actually all 3 framework slides, but particularly that first framework slide, to help them take what they had done in terms of their content knowledge development for leaders and start to build a bridge to materials so that educators could support the work, could support their students in the classroom. So Erin, if you would move to the next slide. Oh, back one, yep. So what that looked like was all educators in the district, K-3, went through TNTP's Science of Reading course, which is a shortened version, right, of what you would get in a VLP training or a letters course, where you're getting some of the brain science, you're getting some of that pedagogical knowledge, but we're not going super in depth. We paired that with a couple of things. One, a change management framework to support divisions and division leaders in thinking about their strategy and how they were going to support the educators and the students that were in their system. Vertically aligned professional learning structures. So making sure that, like we had said before in the vertical spine, that there was specific learning for school leaders, specific learning for educators, specific learning for division leaders, and then opportunities to process and practice within the school community. In Washington County, what this looked like was they would take a module of our Science of Reading course, for example, on phonological and phonemic awareness, and then they would all get together as a school in their grade bands. They would discuss their learning. They would look at the materials that they had in their, they had access to. And they were able to then, to talk, process, talk about what was going to work with their kids, all of those things. What made that bridge really effective and all these pieces come together was the change management framework that we supported Washington County to use. If you are new to implementing something like the Science of Reading or a new set of materials like you all are being required to implement in Virginia this year, would highly suggest that you all think about this as a change management process. There are emotions and there is unlearning to do, right? And there are real people in real classrooms with real kids. And so thinking about and using a change management framework in your work is really critical to making this a success. Erin, if you would move us forward. In Washington County, we use the Lippitt-Noster model that basically, and if you would click again, Erin, it's going to show the whole model, but basically outlines, right, the components of a successful initiative, in this case, of a successful implementation of Science of Reading based instruction. That included vision, skills, incentives, resources, and an action plan. I'm going to share what some of those skills, incentives, and resources were, but the very first step was developing a coherent vision, and they also had an action plan. What this framework allowed folks in Washington County to do was to basically be able to monitor their progress and think about what they needed to provide educators throughout the course of the implementation so that they ended up with success. They could use the pieces in the purple to self-diagnose and say, ooh, we're seeing resistance. That means we're missing incentives. What do we need to put in place to be able to provide those incentives? If you would go forward. And you can see some of the things that were provided in Washington County, right, as it relates to those different categories. So to build skill, they had the science of reading course, they had those processing opportunities, they had opportunities in their PLCs to apply the content to the high quality instructional materials. They had incentives, they had psychological safety, right? They had models of central office and admin being lead learners. So these folks were in these sessions, they were engaging, they were supporting educators. They had protected time and resources, right? If there's one thing I leave you with today, if you are a school leader or a district admin, please protect PLC time for educators to be able to apply what they are learning in their content knowledge development training to the materials that they have and the kids that are in their classroom, right? Those when we like don't have those resources, that is where we run into trouble with implementation. And then they also provided consistency across the vertical spine. So if you go to the next slide, Erin, you'll see everybody had their individual areas of focus, from district leaders to school leaders to coaches to teachers. So district leaders were setting expectations. They laid out and said, this is what we do in PLCs in the district. We apply what we're learning in our content knowledge training to our materials and with our students. School leaders said, school leaders' job was to hold that protected time and focus on, we have one big, we have one big thing that we need to implement this year. We're implementing evidence-based literacy instruction and these new materials, right? Not like 50,000 things. Often you got to act as the air traffic controller as that school leader. And school leaders in Washington County were given the ability to do that, right? And say we have one focus. Coaches planned for and facilitated PLCs. TNTP was able to provide a train the trainer model to those coaches. So our folks at TNTP developed content for those coaches to facilitate in PLCs. We supported and coached them through that process, and they were the ones really leading the learning that was happening at schools. And then teachers' job was to apply their learning, was to think about how they were planning and prepping for lessons with these new materials, and really executing high quality lessons in the classroom. What are the results? These are kindergarten and first grade DIBELS scores in the district from 2019 to 2023. You can see that in kindergarten in particular, the district went from 39% of its kindergarten students meeting DIBELS benchmarks in 2019 to 70% in 2023. So we are moving right in the right direction very quickly in Washington County because of that coherent approach. There's alignment across the vertical spine. Everybody knows their job. There's a clear vision, and the district is saying this is going to take time. There's going to be emotions about it. There's going to be real people who are trying to engage in this, and they have a plan, right, for getting educators what they need to enact change in the classroom. I'm going to turn it over to Ruthie now, who's going to share Prince William County, who's on the very sort of cutting edge, right, of the work that's happening in Virginia, and also this work around implementing evidence-based literacy instruction.
Yes, thank you, Devin. So hi, everyone. I'm really, really excited to get to talk to you about the work we've been doing in Prince William County since the summer and into the beginning of this school year. So we're about halfway through, obviously, the school year. So I have a few like preliminary results I can share, but I just want to give the caveat that this really is just beginning, just like I think most of you are kind of in the same space of just really on the precipice of this work. So I'll start with just kind of giving an overview of our partnership with the district. We're primarily focused around work with the elementary school leaders and then working with the division teaching and learning department to support goals around K-5 literacy. Our two curriculum pieces that we're really supporting this year are HMH into Reading and the University of Florida Literacy Institute materials, commonly referred to as UFly. A couple of just important context pieces, I think, that will be helpful as you kind of learn more of the details around this project. HMH is not technically a new set of materials for this county. They adopted it, I think, in like 2020 as well. So right around when a really great time to adopt new materials, right around COVID. So as you might imagine, with the no-star model that Devin just showed, there were some like false starts with HMH because of COVID challenges, because of sort of like mixed messaging around district expectations with use of materials, things like that. So this was really considered an opportunity to reset with HMH and get everybody on the right path and kind of on the same page about it. With UFly, it really is year one of these materials. It is a new set of materials for foundational skills. So I think that's just kind of helpful context for y'all to know. Within this partnership, we have a couple of buckets of thinking about our priorities that attend to that vertical spine. So I'll kind of outline those in just a second, but they're also kind of outlined on the screen here. So we can go to the next slide and I'll talk through some of those buckets. Did we skip one? Oh, maybe. Can we go? Yeah, let's start here and then I'll actually go back to the theory of change. So within those buckets that I talked about, the structures that we've created within this project are really designed to support every level of the vertical spine. So kind of like what Devin just outlined in Washington County, we had similar structures designed within this project. So knowing that division leaders were really going to be the ones setting the expectation for instruction and curriculum use, they were also the ones to say like, hey, we really are going to do HMH this year. We really are going to do UFly this year. It's not a resource. It's not optional. It's going to be our tier one set of materials and we will implement them with integrity. We wanted to make sure we had structures to support the division in being strategic about how to support that change and monitoring the effectiveness of that change within classrooms. We know that school leaders are a huge part of the puzzle with providing accountability for that work and supporting curriculum use. In this project specifically, reading specialists are targeted with a lot of our support. So I'll talk a lot about the ways that we support them now in the school year through different pieces of this puzzle. But I just want you to kind of know, like, we do support school leaders holistically, but reading specialists are kind of in focus with that work. And then obviously teachers are making a huge shift in both how they prepare for instruction and how they execute literacy instruction. And so, you know, we wanted to keep that in mind while we're mainly providing direct support to that school leadership team. All of this is in service of kind of that main goal of students really having access to high quality curriculum and consistent, strong instruction so that they have a culture where they can take ownership of their learning. So I'll have us go back one slide actually to the theory of action. So this is kind of organized into those three buckets that I just described. We have kind of the division leadership pieces that we wanted to make sure we provided. I'll describe that support in just a second. We had the school leader support that zeroes in on the reading specialists and building capacity for them so that they can really support teachers in understanding their materials and coaching them through that curriculum change. And then building teacher knowledge as well, like Devin described, making sure that they have both the content knowledge, the pedagogical knowledge, and understanding of the high quality instructional materials. So if we kind of do all of these things, our theory was reading specialists and leaders will be equipped with the tools to support effective implementation of instructional materials. So the teachers are doing that with skillful integrity, and that will lead to improved student outcomes. So I'm gonna have us skip, I think it'll be 2 slides now. Yeah, so I'll kind of describe now in more detail what we actually did with those different levels of the system. So with the teacher knowledge pieces, we really launched this work this summer. And so that was that summer training that was part of my bio at the very beginning of this. We did a full series of summer training this year for both HMH and UFly, understanding the materials and then getting teachers into kind of that practice opportunity where they got to understand both the connection to research and how to actually implement some of the routines. So with that work around the summer professional learning, we know that that can't be just like a one and done, hey, you learned this in professional learning, now go do it, without any ongoing school support. So we also now provide ongoing school support for the school leadership team with lots of different tools and lots of different practices that help kind of maintain that work throughout the year. So I'll describe that now. And that is where we get into this really strategic partnership with school leaders that is particularly focused on reading specialists. So we have had some professional learning sessions targeted toward principals specifically, but like Devin talked about, principals are an incredible part of this puzzle, but they play a really different role in understanding curriculum. They don't need to know all the nuts and bolts of curriculum that teachers know. They don't need to even, like reading specialists need to know more than a principal might about specific lessons or specific units of the different curriculum. So we've done introductory sessions of these things just so that principals have an understanding of the work and understanding of why, you know, we're doing the things that we're doing. But they have been more part of just getting tools and resources to champion this work and provide that support and accountability structure. Reading specialists have gotten a lot of different types of support throughout the year as we've extended beyond the summer training. So they get regular professional learning sessions specifically targeted toward their role. So building capacity of, you know, these, how to bring these literacy practices into their building, specific professional learning around what does this actually look like when it's implemented well? How do these materials work? How are they designed? How can you support teachers in, you know, refining their practices? So they're getting ongoing professional learning, as well as they get 3 site visits throughout the school year from our TNTP team that kind of have a beginning of the year, middle of the year, end of the year cadence, where as the work evolves throughout the year, where it's like the beginning of the year, we want to make sure we have a strong start, but we also want to make sure in the middle of the year, we're maintaining that level of curriculum use and people haven't gotten tired or defeated, or, you know, that no-star model where Devin outlined all the different pitfalls that can happen. So those coaching visits happen throughout the year and really focus on co-observations with the reading specialists and creating plans of action based on what those trends show and what kind of the observations show in terms of data. So we're really targeting reading specialists in that work to understand what does this actually look like in your building and how can you support your specific teachers in making this huge change. And then finally, we had some strategic partnership with division leaders. So we can go to the next slide for that. So that involved collaboration with division leaders, particularly within the teaching and learning department, on tools and structures that they could use to both communicate expectations around curriculum use, tools that they could monitor curriculum use, things that they could kind of support this work in an ongoing way, and making sure that they had a strategic plan for, you know, communicating expectations and supporting schools and teachers throughout the year. We've also collaborated with supervisors of elementary and secondary ELA to create that strategy, and facilitated professional learning for associate superintendents and chiefs within the division. And as we've gone through the year, we've monitored progress through both informal and formal data collection pieces, and use that, especially the formal data collection, to provide recommendations for support. So with all of those different moving pieces, as you might imagine, this, with all those layers and all those levels that we're targeting with those different supports, there's a lot going on in this project. But we do have some really, really exciting kind of preliminary data around how it's going. So I can share that with you now. We were able, and you can kind of click through so all the animations come up. We were able to capture in the first quarter of this year some formal data collection with our instructional observation tools. So these measure a variety of different indicators, including what you see on the screen here, but there are some other ones as well. The primary things that we wanted to note in the beginning of this year, especially, was that kind of strong start that I described, where like, have people made the actual change that we wanted them to with the teacher professional learning, with the initial reading specialist professional learning, with the first school visits, et cetera. So again, this is like early days of making this change, and schools were kind of in the middle of all of these different types of support. But what we saw was a really exciting start to this. So in the observations that we had, 95% of lessons were from the division approved high quality instructional materials. So when Devin talks about the implementation gap, like, we're seeing people using the materials, which is so exciting. And then within that, we noted that 97% of those classrooms were within the pacing that was given in the division pacing calendar for that time of the year. So people weren't just like, you know, making the change a couple weeks in or a couple months in. They have been doing this in an ongoing and systematic way since the beginning of the school year. So this, again, is like very early data. We have a long way to go this year. We have multiple school visits still and a lot of snow days, hopefully, to navigate and account for, but really exciting to see kind of how that multi-layered approach results in really people using the curriculum. And now we can kind of work through how do we maintain that level of use and how do we support people in refining those practices so that kids are really shifting their outcomes, you know, similar to what we saw in Washington County. So I know I probably have gotten us over time, but
Ruthie, we are somehow like right at 7, which is incredible for us. For those of you who don't know, us at T, we really like to talk about our work and this stuff. And so we're very excited to be generally on time. I want to wrap us up by saying we've shared a lot with you all today. Our contact information is there. You can contact Ruthie or myself about anything that's come up today. I get to do something really fun, which I don't get to do in sessions like this, which is actually leave you with a state-specific resource that can support you to do this work in your own divisions. So you all may be familiar, or you may not be familiar with the Virginia Literacy Act implementation playbook that the state put out this summer. But many of the things that you heard us talking about, defining roles, starting with a vision, the question about like, what should I be doing in my PLCs? A lot of that is actually answered in the VLA playbook. So I would really encourage you all, click that link. You can also access it from the Virginia Literacy Act website or part of the DOE's website. And if you are a division leader, you may be familiar, but if you are a teacher, you may be able, you know, this may be your first foray, and there's a reading specialist. There's lots of great information there, lots of links to some additional resources and that sort of thing. So wanted to leave you all with that tonight. As a Virginia specific resource, but also, like I said, if you want to know more about how this work is unfolding across the country, certainly email Ruthie or I, and we'll make sure to work with the Reading League team to get you the resources from tonight's session. So thank you all so much for your time. I'm going to turn it back over to the Reading League. I know they have a couple of things that they wanted to close out with.
Devin and Ruthie, thank you so much for being here. This topic is incredibly timely for what we're all experiencing right now with the Virginia Literacy Act. I want to give a special shout out though to Ruthie, who I don't know if we acknowledged this yet, came in right at the nick of time just this morning. So I know that on our flyer, we had advertised for Julie to join us. Unfortunately, she was unwell, so Ruthie is the one that stepped in to kind of save the day so she could talk about some of the work that was happening right here in Virginia. I know that some of you may have had some questions as they were speaking and had their talk. Again, here are their contact information so that you're able to reach out to them. I did receive one private message that was a fabulous idea. If you are comfortable and you are TRL membership, the ask was, where's everybody from? So that you can connect with each other, because we at TRL Virginia really do want to promote the opportunity for you all to engage with each other. So if you're comfortable saying where you're from or dropping an email, feel free to do that so that you can touch base with each other, because some of you might actually hail from neighboring or maybe even the exact same division. But Devin and Ruthie, thank you so, so much for such an important topic that I think we all found the information that you shared very, very valuable. And at this point, I'm going to turn it to Jacqueline, who can tell us a little bit more about membership and opportunities that we have within the Virginia Reading League.
Thanks, Erin. It is an honor and a privilege being a member of a community of dedicated educators, ensuring literacy for all in the state of Virginia and beyond. Having access to reading research and evidence-based instruction practices, resources through webinars by dedicated partners of literacy such as yourself, Devin and Ruthie. We so appreciate you. Just networking opportunities. And this year we offered free membership. We were able to do that this year, but that's just some of the benefits that we have. And so as the Reading League Virginia, as partners with the Reading League National, as well as Virginia-based partners like the Virginia Joint Coalition for Learning Disabilities and Literacy. To date, our events and resources have included collaborations with TTAC, VLP, and VDOE. Next slide, please. Becoming an ambassador is an awesome way to utilize your professional and social networks to share information about events, the mission, and how to join our growing league. If this piques your interest, scan the QR code and complete the form to learn more and attend an upcoming information session. So Kelsey has put those links in the chat for you. And so please reach out if you are interested in becoming a Reading League Virginia ambassador. Shop the Reading League Virginia store for the latest apparel and merchandise, hoodies sold in gray, blue, and gold. Wearing this apparel is a great way to garner attention to our league and a wonderful avenue to begin a conversation about how we support literacy for all. Devin and Ruthie, thank you for sharing your knowledge and expertise with us this evening. As a division reading specialist, this is my first year being a division reading specialist. I look forward to sharing the nuggets that I've gleaned from your presentation. We appreciate all the wonderful work you do, bringing research, policy, and consulting together to support and transform our educational system. Special thanks to our members and attendees for taking time to participate in this literacy experience. Erin, back to you.
All right, well, that wraps us up. So thank you, everybody, staying just a few minutes over time, but that just shows everybody's dedication. So thank you all. And Devin and Ruthie will be in touch with you just to offer a little gift.
Oh, thank you all so much.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
It was awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank y'all. This was great information. I appreciate it greatly.
So will you be emailing us the slide deck, or where do we find that?
Yes, we can send that information out to you.